No.
Because if you are,
I don't know.
You are.
Also, the thing is, they don't have a lot of redheads out there. Like, it's less common than here.
Mm-hmm.
So when they see, they'd see Kelsey or whatever, and all of a sudden it'd be like, they were just like, well, there's something you don't see every day. So they'd stare.
You may as well have been in Japan or something.
Yeah.
My uncle has a shock of red hair, and he said whenever he goes to Japan, he's treated like, I don't know, like he has a spotlight coming out the top of his head. Everybody just is fascinated by red hair.
Well, I can imagine 99.999% of their entire population is nothing but black hair and brown eyes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm not full-blown ginger like I once was, but not far off.
Well, all right. So we got some folks on. I think two of them are both are family members. So we got maybe 4 people on right now. That's enough, I guess. More people going on if it's going to happen. All right. So we'll get into the podcast here. We'll go ahead and do the introduction. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an American Arms Company production. This is the Bad Company Podcast. Today we have no sponsor. Someday we might. So I'm just going to plug the only people who have done anything for this channel at any point. That is Warwolf Ordnance. If you're looking for some badass shotgun shells, especially in 10 gauge, check them out at www.warwolfordnance.com. And now that I have been a corporate whore, we'll introduce our guest for today, one of the Bad Company crew, Matt Juicy Tits himself.
Howdy, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. Podcasting debut.
All right. And the reason I call him Juicy Tits is because his last name is Justice, and that's just fun.
Yeah, all of high school, it was honestly Juicy Tits. Depending on what I was doing, it was Juicy Tits or Justice. I never went by Matt until 5 years ago. No exaggeration.
Well, your first name isn't even legally Matt, so we'll just leave that mystery there.
And frankly, I have an ample chest. I mean,
they're very juicy. He likes to be made of. So if you want to make of him in the comments, if you're part of the live chat, go ahead. He will be flattered. But anyhow. Today's podcast for me is brought to you by a wonderful Chateau Morset Orchard Series blackberry wine. Let's see if I can actually get this on.
Oh, that is delicious.
Oh, yeah.
I remember I had that.
It is very sweet. I'm going to top my glass off here. You're being brought to you by Adult Grape Juice for me. And Matt, what's bringing you here today?
So this is straight Jameson, actually, Drake. So I'm almost tired of being a mannequin from the neck down. I'm totally hairless. So I'm trying to fight that a little bit by drinking manly drinks. Yeah. Margaritas were about as far as I go for the longest time, but I'm changing.
I see. So no pickle juice chasing that today? Just sipping the Jameson?
For the love of God, no. For the love of God, no. I can't do pickles, though. Your grandfather's pickles were great. They were delicious, but pickles, any other pickle.
You know what's really good is my cousin Eddie's drunken cherries. The ones that if you eat 10, you'll probably go blind.
Yeah. So the fruit at the bottom of moonshine is not to be trifled with.
That's just a jar of moonshine vodka cherries.
Yeah,
it's nothing but that.
You'll force karaoke on everybody around you if you have enough of those, and then you'll pass out.
Absolutely. So here today, we'll get into the core of the podcast, I guess. We're going to do an after show, and this will probably become a theme whenever we do podcasts here. We'll have an after show where it's no holds bar. We just kind of do and say whatever we want to do. And if we've been drinking during the podcast, well, that'll be the most fun time. We're still working together on how we're going to set that up. If it's simply going to be an unrecorded tail end of a podcast during a live session, or if we're going to do like an after show podcast that's posted on either a B channel or on a different playlist for American Arms channel. But we'll figure that one out when that time comes. Maybe the inspiration will strike us tonight. But anyhow, so the reason Matt is joining us for the first time today and it's something we've been discussing for actually quite a time and discussing getting podcasts rolling for American Arms Channel, is the idea of a new hunter as an adult, really thinking about a lot of different aspects. But at its base, there's probably three core things. It's, how do you find interest? How do you get into it? And then three, how do you decide whether or not it's for you? And those aren't three, sequential. I believe that those are three simultaneous questions that have to be answered that are part of your adventure. If you're an adult looking to get into outdoor recreation sports, adventure sports, or like in this instance, hunting and fishing. Particularly, Matt is focused on hunting. And while I can't say that, he's got the drive to, or yet at least, to just go out every single second he has to further that, he's definitely taken a huge step in the last 12 months of getting into it, really being passionate about it and wanting to learn and learn quickly. So we're going to give a lot of the floor today to Matt, but I really just want to start off by having Matt introduce his background and, bring us up to the point that you started to consider that you want to get into hunting and that you want to start trying different things because, just as an aside or a prelude to your background, you are no stranger to adventure and to basically rigorous physical activity. So if it has that, it kind of went hand in hand for you. So I'll let you take the floor and bring us up to speed on what your background is and why hunting sounded like an entertaining passion.
Yeah, so I guess my track record would be I've always liked things that vaguely suck, for lack of a better term. So weightlifting was the first one. So when I was 13, 14 years old, I took it very seriously. I was a big old boy in high school. That was my thing. And I've kind of gone into and out of weightlifting my entire adult life, but that's always been, and that kind of vaguely sucks. Another one was jiu-jitsu. So I've done jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, I've been a martial artist. The grinding nature of those things, the difficulty of those things has always been, I guess, what Joe Rogan, to mention our Lord and Savior, would call type 2 fun. So type 1 fun would be like roller coaster, where you ride up and down, wee the whole time. As soon as it's over, the fun is over. You don't really talk about roller coasters that much. You don't have some deep-seated desire and love for roller coasters unless you're an engineer or something. So type 2 fun would be something that you tend to enjoy and reflect on after the fact more so, and thinking about it, talking about it, preparing for it is most of the fun. So historically, that's been what I've been drawn to as far as my hobbies go. Same with guitar. Guitar, you might play for a year and get 5 to 6 minutes of music you've written yourself that you're happy with. So with that in mind, I felt like I had that going for me. I grew up around firearms. My father was career military, so I was never a stranger to firearms themselves. I can't say I practiced as much until I started to get ready for hunting, but I was always comfortable around them. So yeah. I mean, I knew from an early age that I like to check certain primal boxes, for lack of a better word. So hunting, being able to provide food for yourself, is a primal box worth checking, and I've always thought that. My problem was I never really had access to the kind of information I needed to get it started. It's kind of daunting finding where to go, licensure rules, and then simply learning how to think as the animal you're hunting and find them in the first place. So it's challenging. So in a world like we have now, you have access to so much information, but breaking it down and picking the stuff worth knowing is difficult. So that's where somebody like you comes in. But yes, right. That's the gist of it. I come from a background of liking things that vaguely suck. And loving them, and hunting was something I thought might fit in that category.
Right. So, I mean, in essence, what happened with you is, so you kind of had an interest in a venture like that for a while, but you didn't know where to start. And really, and this will kind of take us into one of the big topics in our discussion here tonight, is you didn't have someone to set your compass in a direction, right? Mm-hmm. So Matt and I, until very recently, here in October of 2020. We're coworkers for a better part of a year and a half, and really started working together about, I guess it would have been September, October of last year. And we were assigned to the same community. We worked for a home builder together. And I, being the person that I am, constantly thinking about outdoor stuff and, doing work that's not what earns me a paycheck, basically. Hunting and fishing and camping and being in the outdoors and woodsmanship, et cetera, is really what drives my mind and my heart a lot. So very, very earthly drive in that regards. So Matt kind of met me, and through that conversation, we sort of picked up on, you wanted to give it a try. And being who I am, I'm always passionate about getting somebody else, even if they only try it once or twice, I want them to see my side of the fence, or, come look at my backyard and see what you like. And maybe you'll take some of that imprint to you, and you'll always have something good to say about that. At least in very little minimal effort, it's just good stewardship to show others that you're not just out bloodlusting. You're, for that particular sport, you're out there for a reason, which is in a lot of cases, much more spiritual than it is physical in desire and need. Matt kind of asked me, and honestly, our first hunt together was much more successful and much more of a rinky-dink kind of just coincidental hunt than anything. We just said, hey, this day, and that'll work. And what are we going to do? And I'd been putting in the time, and I was like, all right, we're going to go waterfowl hunting. And of course, me being waterfowl hunting, big surprise, right? If 5 things about me, 3 of them are about duck hunting. So we go out for early goose season in teal, and it hits perfect. I mean, we had a beautiful morning, and I mean, at the end of it, we were at it from 4:30 a.m. until noon when we finally got back to the house cleaning birds, and we shot horrible at times. We both downed geese. We ended up taking 4 geese. I ended up having to run in the kayak through rapids a half mile downriver to pick one up. We should have dropped 4 at least in the one volley. I mean, we had a video up on the channel at one time, but I realized after it was uploaded, it was corrupted and the audio and everything wasn't synced. So I've made that unlisted, and just Matt and I have the links to that. It's kind of just for our memory. I have all the footage. Maybe I'll get a chance to re-edit that and post it someday. But anyhow, so that's kind of the connection there is, I think, and you give me your input here. I mean, what the first thing to do when somebody figures out that, hey, I want to give this a try? I mean, do you go to the internet, or do you go to find the first person that does that?
I would say to find the first person, because a lot of getting into a hobby that is as immersive, that is such a rabbit hole, is the culture of it. And you don't really get the culture of it as much from the internet, I don't think. I think that the passion for it kind of seeps out of your pores, and you have to kind of actively resist it, not to build off of it. So for me, I'm extroverted, so I need to learn from people, and I drink the culture in from being around people. I can't really get information that I can apply off the internet as well.
Right. So let's say you are a suburban or urbanite, for lack of a better term. And I've been thinking about this myself, and I think I have a good answer for it, but I want to hear your take as the new hunter, Matt, as being the new guy in the corral. You don't have anybody who does that. Maybe grandpa did, maybe an uncle did back in the day. And either they're too old now or they passed away, and your only memory is, yeah, they used to do that, and here's some old black and white photos, or here's some old photos, that are all ratted up in a shoebox of a buck they took, or a string of ducks, or a string of trout, or, what do you, in your mind, you don't have anybody. All you have is YouTube videos and the internet forums to try and find a way. I mean, today, obviously, that's somebody who needs to connect is going to do that. But what is your first step, do you think, to finding a person that will get you out there?
Ooh, that's a good question. Finding a person. So I guess where you live kind of affects that quite a bit. So I grew up in kind of a weird spot. Northern Virginia is a very developed area. It's not quite a city, but it's highly developed. And that's more or less where I grew up. We were never very far from farmland. So half my high school were avid hunters. So I guess with that in mind, if you're from a suburban place, I mean, the internet forums are not a bad place to get started, I suppose. But I mean, for me, it was luck of the draw. I ran into you, and you were just so passionate about it, and you stayed on me about getting me to do it. Yeah, I think that depends very heavily on where you live as to how accessible people that are into this hobby can be. Hey, Drake, I cannot hear you. Give me one moment. Let me try to find out what's going on here.
Sorry, I got it figured out. I had my mic muted because I had the local fire engine siren going off. I forgot I muted myself. Anyway, so I would go off that and say that to me, the two immediate avenues that I would say that somebody who's looking to do that and doesn't have a person, has no surrounding to get into it, right? Just again, sees YouTube, sees reviews. Maybe they've landed on a publication like Outdoor Life or Peterson's Hunting or something like that, or they landed on the Ducks Unlimited website or something like that. They've seen something they really like, and it doesn't have to be hunting. It can be really any outdoor recreation sport. And they just sort of start getting into it, right? And they're like, I really want to do this. I think, honestly, one of your biggest avenues is going to be Facebook in this day and age. You can do a search and find tons of groups for your state or locality. Even if you live in areas like New York City, Los Angeles, Tampa Bay, Washington, D.C., if you live in areas that you're like, there is no way in hell I can drive less than 3 hours and find somewhere that I can just barely get a Saturday morning hunt in, I think you'd be very much surprised. For example, me being from New York, I know for a fact that there are a lot of waterfowlers and there are a lot of small game and bird hunters on Long Island. Is the access there? Not really. And a lot of it's locked up by clubs. But there's the potential to find a mentor, right? Also, if you go the other direction, you can be in farmland in 3 hours or less in Orange County and other areas, and go up the Hudson Valley area, and you can find public land areas. The same thing goes for if you're into, obviously in Tampa, deep sea fishing is extremely accessible. So there's a lot of folks who enjoy that. But maybe there's some guys who are like, I really want to go out on a teal hunt. Or I see these guys, posting videos of shooting wood ducks and teal up in the swamps. And heck, take a 2-hour drive or less, and you can put yourself in a place that somebody can help you, right? So the first thing to do, I would do, is search for a forum, an active forum. And I would do my research, right? I'd look through posts. I'd request to be a member, and then I'd look through posts, and are the guys seem like they're decent? Because and I have a podcast up about this. Sometimes in this community, we're our own worst enemy. So you got to sometimes filter through or try to look at, hey, is this a group of guys that looks like, or girls that looks like they're taking care of each other, and they're, there might be some ball busting or some rib jabs, but they're actually focused on, hey, let's be welcoming to new guys, and let's try and better ourselves and share our passion, right? Examples of that, if you're on Facebook, Fellowship of the Duck Gun, fantastic group. There's over 3,000 or 4,000 members to date, and they really don't get at each other. And they're not really that much, they're not moderated that much. The admins don't do a lot. They post and stuff, and they do a whole bunch of different things. But if you're into waterfowling or you're interested in it, you can find somebody right there. You could put a post, go, hey, I'm in Central Ohio, or hey, I'm in Northern Colorado, and I'm really interested in getting into this. I need a mentor and somebody to help me out and show me direction. Is anybody local? And you'll find, I'll tell you, you'll probably find 5 guys that'll be like, yeah, I'll take you out. You're not going to be best hunting buddies, but you'll find a couple guys that are like, hey, let's get you on a couple hunts. Let's get your butt started. And you're a big boy or a big girl. And we're going to push you out of the nest real quick. And it's going to be like, happy first season. Go figure it out. We'll be here if you need us. And there is that opportunity everywhere. So that would be my number one. My second place to stop would be with organizations like Ducks Unlimited, with organizations like National Wild Turkey Federation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Whitetails Unlimited, Pheasants Forever. You name the game species, there's an organization for it. You name a conservation practice or a sporting club, something that could be a sporting club, no matter what outdoor recreation it is. And there is going to be a group of guys and gals who do just that. And it will either be an actual club or it will be a national or state organization. You reach out to them, find out what your local chapter is. Those folks, I'm going to tell you that in some places, it's not your local classic fuddy gun club where it's just a dozen guys who are 70 years old and hate life itself and just sit around and drink and do that kind of crap, right? They're just the classic Elmer Fudd of the world, right? It's not going to be that, especially if you go with a really legitimate associated organization or associated chapters. You're going to find a couple people that are really going to be passionate about introducing you to the sport. So I would say those are your two avenues. I honestly wouldn't even bother with the organization route unless that you haven't found anything locally. Because those organizations, especially, like if you haven't found anybody locally to take you out and mentor you, or, and obviously have conversations with these people, feel out, be an intelligent person. If you're going through this process anyways, you're probably a really competent person to think this through. You're not just getting a firearm or a bow and buying a license and marching your butt into the woods, which, having gone to Virginia Tech and having lived around the Blacksburg area, I know for a fact that is what a lot of the Asian foreign students do. They're really into it. They really love it for some reason. Their culture doesn't have any exposure to that. So they come in, they find out about it, or they found out before they come to school, and all of a sudden they realize they're in America and they can do these things. They're all about just I mean, I've heard countless stories of guys in gun shops being like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe I saw these Chinese students that went out in the woods in neon sports shorts and shot squirrels, and then were hauling, or were out, they were deer hunting and they ended up popping a doe. And I don't even think it was a doe. These kids don't really know. They're just like, it's deer season.
I will say
I saw a deer. I killed a deer. And now, so there's there's people that are going to do that, right? That are so excited about it. But I think a lot of folks who are going to be adults and come into it in this sort of situation like you, and I'll end my long-windedness and we'll get you talking again. I think you're going to be really competent to just put in the effort, because that's a key takeaway. I know we talked about, you wanted to impress. It's effort. It's work. Just getting started is a lot of work. I mean, you knew somebody, but I mean, you had to actively take on this is what I'm going to do. He's going to help me. I'm going to learn. And then I don't just show up, and I'm not just you can't just expect your mentor to put you in front of an animal. In fact, your first series of hunts, you should expect to not be successful.
A majority of your hunts in total will be unsuccessful. And that's something you need to just accept before getting into it. But yeah, that's why you have to love the process. Just a funny side thing, I think a majority of the time that I've been to the range, I'd say 50 to 60% of the people I've seen there have been Chinese students at Tech. It's crazy just how many
local free range. Yeah,
I love it there. I love it. So yeah, and I should say, just because me personally, my way of learning, my preferred way of learning is from a person, that does not mean there is not a viable way to do that. I mean, I have several things that I do. I play guitar and I'm on several forums with it all the time. So that's, if that's what you have access to, that is a perfectly viable way of doing it. I just personally like learning from a person. So.
Right. Yeah. And you can self-teach, right? So for waterfowling, it's my biggest passion, right, when it comes to hunting. And to be honest, we didn't have true waterfowlers in my family. I was raised to be a rifleman. I was raised to shoot a shotgun like a lot like a rifle, like how to lead like you do with a rifle, etc., and how to hit a bird, which you can be successful at. But there's a lot more to wing shooting. There's a lot more to duck hunting than treating it like deer hunting, right? So a lot of there was carryover. But when I got passionate about waterfowl. Was the first waterfowl I ever shot was a goose, and that first morning of goose hunting was I just was in camo in a shiny aluminum old Sea King paddle boat with no motor on it in a beaver pond swamp, and just trying to shoot resident honkers on the 1st of September in New York. And I had a hand-me-down shotgun and a box full of 90s steel. It was just, here you go. And I'm like, well, Dad, when you come in, like, I don't know the first thing about duck hunting. And he just would tell me, how did he do it? Dad never decoyed. Dad never called. Dad never thought about that. He only puddle jumped and pass shot because they were ducks and geese, and he never has killed a goose. He still has to kill a goose, and he's into it more now than I am, and I'm an adult and take him along. But Dad just had no clue, right? He was a deer hunter. He could tell me everything about deer hunting and pass that on to me. But and small game too, but he was not a waterfowl guy. So I had to teach myself everything about waterfowl. The internet, growing up in the age of, I was 14 years old when YouTube really became a thing. Right. So you and I are about the same age. We're maybe years difference. We grew up in a time where our entire life has been the development of the internet. I remember not having a computer in the house. I remember having a 3 channels on the TV and having a phone on the wall. I didn't know what a cell phone was, right? Mom and Dad ended up having a cell phone, but it was this emergency thing that, they both ended up getting a little tiny flippy, and that was for emergencies that they had to go to work. Like, the thing was off 90% of the time, right? It was this emergency, like almost the way people treated satellite phones in a way, right? This is hey, I really need to call 911, or I really need to get a hold of grandparents for the grandkids or whatever. I'm not going to make it home from work and I can't get to a phone. This is my lifeline. And coming up through that age, from that point to today, it was a perfect time to go like, hey, guys started strapping cameras to their heads and their guns back in 2005.
The Lewis and Clark of the internet. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And so hunters took to the internet faster than I think a lot of recreation sports did. You think about we're the first people in motocross to start strapping cameras to themselves and really filming that stuff. Well, yeah, they were doing that stuff in their basement and doing VHS tapes, but to upload it onto the internet, hunters were some of the first people doing that kind of thing, right?
It probably has a lot to do with just the things that you see while you're hunting are just absolutely one of a kind, and they're hard to and like you have just a plethora of stories, and I even in my few, I have things that I love to tell anybody that'll listen. There's just so much that happens in the woods, and there's so much beauty in seeing a sunrise that is just worth documenting. And I think that it's contagious if you could show people. It's absolutely contagious.
Absolutely.
Like for me, when we went deer hunting, I didn't see a deer, hear a deer. There was no chance I was going to see or hear a deer because I was within smelling distance of a black bear. The first time I ever went in the woods, I got to watch a black bear. I don't know. I'm a total noob. I cannot judge distance. I give you 3 different distances, 3 different times telling the story. But I was within smelling distance of a black bear for 30 to 45 minutes, and I watched this thing do its thing. And I was looking at it through my rifle scope the entire time, and I would not have had it go any other way. I didn't see what I was hunting. I didn't have a shot at what I was hunting, but I would not have it any other way.
It's one of those things you could have captured on camera. Now that would definitely convey, but there's things like subtleties of the sunrise and the crispness of the air that you don't capture with a lens. You can't. You can take some of the most beautiful pictures with some of the best equipment and share it across the entire world, and you can't capture it. But it's enough to get people to want to see it for themselves, right? And it's one of those things too that hasn't pushed me. I haven't been pushed far enough to want to, I guess, share the true intimate moment and not experience it myself. That's why I strap my potato to my head, my GoPro. I need a better GoPro, honestly, but I call it my little potato because it gives halfway decent quality videos for what today's equipment can do. And it's just my perspective, right? And it's more so I post it to share like everybody does, but it's more so for me and my buddies, right? To see the hunt again, right? Because in 10 years, we might think, oh, remember that day we went over to that lake and, or for our example, remember that day we went and it was just a terrible rainy day and we ended up coming home with a dog. It's a completely different story.
I had in my head, and that was like the fourth one. There's so many.
We'll cover that maybe later in the podcast or in the after show. But
I almost shot that dog. I thought it was
you almost shot that dog, and we'll leave it at that. And now she's one of the best animals I own. I've ever owned. But anyhow, it's really hard to in the optic of new hunters. There's obviously that grasp that this media plays in getting them pulled in, and I think that's incredibly important that everybody who can shares their experiences, because it's a rabbit hole with a million different offshoot tunnels. You can go any which way, and I think it's wonderful. It may be daunting to a lot of people to see, but I think it's important for everybody to go, there's so much I can do in just this little thing. If I find this to be my passion, I will never be bored, because the second I go, yeah, I think I've learned enough, it's going to throw you a curveball and probably get you entranced, or something in the same area of focus is going to take your attention. You're going to go, oh, deer hunting kind of bored me after 10 years, but what's this thing about what a ruffed grouse, right? And then you learn, you're like, oh, that's that bird that scared the living crap out of me and gave me a heart attack one day when I was walking through the woods and exploded out from underneath my feet. And then you'll get into that, and then you'll never see another ruffed grouse, right? You'll be like, oh, well, but it will be something to chase, right? You'll always have this. It's kind of like kayaking or biking. You're like, oh, there's this one style. That's fun. But you start with just paddling around your local river or lake, right? And the next thing you know, you're like, oh, I want to do rough water kayaking, or I want to go rafting. Oh, I want to do sea kayaking and paddle 3 miles offshore and catch a freaking tuna. And there's so many directions you can go with it. There's so many different adventures you can have. So I think it's incredibly important for a new hunter's perspective is don't be overwhelmed. Just whatever you take the biggest liking to, whether it's deer, small game, or waterfowl, or maybe it's fishing. You think about trout fishing or fly fishing, whatever it may be, whatever your passion is that you think you're attracted to, you need to go try it, because you might find that this is something that you start passing down to your children and to your friends and family, and you just keep swelling that interest in bonding over something that's not looking at our little stupid magic box we keep in our pocket, which will probably all give us cancer in 20 years. But, most likely, yeah.
All cancer specifically.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of ass cancer in the future. I'm making that prediction now. I won't even put money on it. There's going to be a lot of ass cancer.
I say that as Joseph Smith made the Book of Mormon. I'm certain it is. I'm certain. I feel like with hobbies, they are only worth doing so long as you enjoy them. So
right.
Get stale. Like I play guitar, and for probably 6 years, I played fingerstyle guitar exclusively. And then that got kind of old. So then I started playing my favorite thing, metal, and I jump around. It only is good as long as it serves you. And with hunting, the worst case scenario, the worst thing that can happen is you spend a day in the woods. You see a sunrise and you spend a day in the woods. With guitar, the worst case scenario is I get mad because I keep fat fingering stuff and I smash my guitar on the ground. Like I did. The worst case.
Well, maybe you do because you.
Yeah, but like with hunting, you're just going to be in the woods. You're going to be on a kayak. You're going to be with friends, or you'll be by yourself, and it'll be incredibly serene. And
it's once you get through, and this is something I like to tell new hunters. I know I've told it to you, Matt, when we first started. There is going to be those days after your first successes and after you start to feel, you're not seasoned. Like I'm a young guy. I'm a young buck. I've got a lot of hunts ahead of me. until I go to the happy hunting ground in the sky. I've got a lot of hunts ahead of me, but I'm not uber focused on, I got to take the limit. I got to kill these birds. I got to kill this deer. I got. And I'm like this on the ground, right? All I see is the deer tracks. All I see is the wing or listen for is the wings in the air. I've gotten to the point where I actually stopped seeing as much of what I'm looking for as I just am there. One of my favorite and most just deeply spiritual moments every time you go into the woods, you go into the marsh, you go to the lake, go to the river, when you're out there, and it's part of the reason I try to get away from other people as much as possible when I'm going and doing this, is I just want to become part of that, right? I want to stop being a stranger and an intruder, and I want to be part of it. There is that moment as the world wakes up and or when you sit down after a long walk and all of a sudden the tweet birds and the squirrels stop having that interest in you and barking at you or bopping around you, and they just sort of move on or just exist around you, right? You're just part of it. They treat you no different than any other critter that's going to come wandering through. It's that point, when you reach that point in your mindset and in your passion for the sport, for the tradition. I think it's better to call it a tradition. And I would honestly say blood inheritance. I mean, it's built into our biological nature.
Yeah, primal box. You're checking a primal box. I agree.
Yeah, it's that primal box you talk about. It's just you're there, right? And you take that breath and you don't think about breaths anymore. You don't think about time. I mean, one of the hardest things for me is, once again, this little magical box we carry around. This is very hard these days to leave in the truck. This is very hard these days to turn off and put in the pack, because the wife wants to know you're alive. Your mom wants to know that you're alive. Your dad wants to see how successful you are. You feel like, oh, I got to share everything. Oh, look, the deer I just dropped. Oh, man, look, everybody on YouTube, everybody on Facebook. Oh, am I great? Because there's this need to be social and a creature of sharing. And that's what we really are. But in a lot of ways, I am the biggest sinner when it comes to this. I need to stop taking this. I need to stop taking this phone with me. This little magical box does more evil to me than by just being present, because if I fall into it. I've had hunts, and I did it one year. I was sitting there, I was waiting for deer. I just chased a little button buck around. I'm like, well, where's your mom? Kind of thing, because it was a doe day, and I didn't want to take this little guy, and I'm looking for him, and I'm just keep following him 50 yards at a time. I'm like, he's going to get me with a doe. Like, I'm going to see a doe, right? It never happened. And I just sat down, I'm looking around, and I start, screwing around and and then next thing you know, I look up, I'm like, I've been sitting here on the freaking phone I've been sitting in front of a gully, which is probably going to have a deer walk through. A deer could have walked 100 yards away that I could have shot.
They could have magic monk dance right in front of your face. You had no idea.
Yeah, I had no idea. I go, the hell? And I turned this thing off, threw it in my backpack. I was like, it took me 15 minutes. And there's that little evil urge, like, I don't know, you got to have your little magic box. You got to look at it. You got to look at it. And I went, no. And I put it away. And I took a deep breath and I go, holy crap, this is so much better. And I look at my watch, and I feel like I've been out there for 3 hours. It's been 35 minutes. And I go, wow. Yeah, I sit here and zombify on this thing so often. And that's what I think a lot of new hunters and a lot of new outdoor recreation people are going to find. I mean, like we go on a rafting trip, right? You and I and our wives, your fiance now, congratulations again. We're going to make that public here. So he and his girlfriend.
My boyfriend. No, you got to leave him out. You can't.
Oh yeah. Aaron. No, he just, congratulations to you guys. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Toast to you guys in public on the podcast. Take a drink. Yes. But we go on this rafting trip, and we were on the Gauley for probably 6.5 hours.
I'd say maybe a little less, but very close. Yeah, very close.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you put the bus rides on it too. I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
The whole entire time, I don't know if I even took the GoPro. I think we were just like, the hell with all the electronic stuff, leave it in the truck, and we just went. You know,
the whole time. Yeah.
We were up from, and that's one of the great things about hunting. You can get up at 4 a.m. and you won't get back until 1. You've already had a full day, and there's still a day to live.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that suits me really well because I've been I'm a military family, so I had no option of sleeping past 7 o'clock. So I've always been a morning person. I was waking up and cleaning the friggin' house or doing something. But I've always been a morning person, so that's also, I think, very important in learning to hunt.
And even if you're not a morning person, you can still get up at 7 o'clock and go for afternoon or midday hunts. It doesn't.
That's true.
Morning is great. It doesn't determine success. Just get out and do your thing. I guess my real basis of that segment of the conversation is when you're not doing this kind of stuff, when you're just playing video games, when you're just laying in the house doing nothing, human beings are not, I mean, it's great to have rest. Don't get me wrong. I am probably one of the laziest guys when it comes to like, oh man, I've got nothing in me. I'm going to go lay down. The days I've hated the most in my 26 years of life have been the days that I knew I should have gone and done something. I knew I should have made myself happy by just going and trying, right? And I didn't. I said, there's so much work. And I got all nasty about it in my own head and just laid there and did nothing. And then I hated myself. I hated myself for it. So human beings, our condition in life almost requires some form of suffering to achieve success. Because if you have success, it can't really be success unless there was some sort of suffering to lead to it, right? There is that there's that pain, that growth, that blossoming. That to get the beautiful flower, you have to go through the trials of planting the seed and growing the seed and tending to the seed and making sure nothing happens to the new plant until that rose is matured and blossoms out. And then you have your product, right? Then you have the fruit of your labors. That's why there is that idiom, the fruit of your labors, because you have to put in the time, you have to put in the work. So if you're kind of person that's like, oh man, I don't want to do anything more than it takes to exist, you know, it's that roller coaster example. And I'm glad you made that at the beginning of the podcast, because I wrote a paper my freshman year of college that focused on used exactly that example. If you are thrilled enough to take a predetermined path of point A to B, you're just a get there person. There's blinders on. I just want to do this, and I'm going to accelerate my heart rate and feel and then I'm good, right? But if you're I got to know what's on the next river bend. I got to know what's over the next hill. I've got to find what's through that next experiment. Even if somebody else has found out before, you may ignore their results just to learn for yourself. Yeah. If you're that type of person, hunting and outdoor recreation is your thing. It is for you.
And like for me too, this might be a point worth making. So I'm wired hot. I have a lot of energy. If I don't exercise almost every day, I know the minute my head hits the pillow that I have goofed. So and with that being wired hot, anxious is a tendency. And I don't exactly have the most laser-like focus. Anyone that knows me knows this about me. But in the woods, going hunting, it's almost like having the goal hanging over my head, this primordial goal over my head. I am dialed in. I cannot think about a thing except for my next step, that sound I'm hearing, looking over the ridge. I cannot think about a single thing except for where I am being a part of this ecosystem. So it almost is like and I don't want to sound too woo-woo, but it was almost like an out-of-body experience my first time going and doing it. After we set up, we sit there, we're waiting on sunrise. Being in not wilderness, I said wilderness, but being out there with that intention, it was very, very special. And for as somebody that has dealt with anxiety and frankly ADHD my entire life, there was none of it at any point in time in the woods.
Right.
It was quite, and that was actually a concern that I had before getting into it. I was like, am I going to be trigger shy? That was one big thing. I was like, am I going to see this animal and seize up? I worried about that more than I ever would. Yeah. Which was not a problem, fortunately. But I was also worried that I would just be so scatterbrained that I would have no ability to enjoy it. I'd be uncomfortable. But it was none of that whatsoever.
I mean, you can, that 2 minutes you can unpack for hours. What you just said, you could unpack for hours. But the three things, I say three things. I'm always like, oh, the three things. I'm going to hit on a couple points that you talked about and kind of work backwards. But that freeze up that you're worried about, that's part of the reason why you were like, I want to go deer hunting. I was like, hold up, wait a minute.
Yeah, go.
Let's do something that's not as big, not as intense, because I can tell you, and you still haven't killed a deer yet, but I was like, let's not wait. Let's get you, and I explained to you why. I told you, like, hey, let's get you on small game. Let's get a squirrel or a goose or a duck or something, right? Let's break the ice with a very small animal, because you've got to, when something's incredibly smaller than you are, you've got that, I got it kind of mentality, right? You're like that cat in the corner that's been eyeing that fly on the wall for an hour. You're just like, smack. Oh my God, I got it. Wonderful. Let's eat it, right? And you don't get that time to really go, oh my God, until, of course, we're humans, so we're not immediately just tearing the thing apart. I mean, if you are, more power to you. But we're not, yeah. But if you're, you get it. Like when I put that, the first animal he killed, it was kind of a half kill. You shot twice, you hit the teal, and I swung through and I shot twice, I missed, and then
you made a friggin' Michael Jordan in the fourth quarter game.
Yeah.
Shot. You shot through a bush. That was ridiculous. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, you're like, did you get it? I'm like, yeah, I got it.
That was ridiculous.
To be fair, it was a point-blank shot. It was the first shot in anger you'd ever taken. But the point was, I put that in your hand. You're like, oh my God, he's kind of cute. And I was like, yeah, I warned you, he was cute. Teal are cute. Noises. But you're like, they taste good. I'm like, oh my God, they are the best duck you can eat. Because they are. They objectively are the best tasting duck. We ate them that day. I mean, you ate 3/4 of the duck. I had a leg. You ate the rest of it. And you put it over a bed of rice. Once again, it was that whole thing of just getting into it, right? It was just diving right on into it and in that complete immersion. But if you're a new hunter, if you're going for this and you're a new hunter, or you're somebody introducing a new hunter, I think you really, 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 really need to start on small game. I'm convinced of it. I think you need to start there, because that freeze up can occur. Because when it's an animal that weighs as much as you do, and it stands up to your belly button or chest high, like that's an intense moment. You are not able to have any sort of mental dissidence in that. This is my focus. This is what I'm going to do. And as an adult, you think about it much more. As a kid, it's very easy to tell a kid, like, hey, the deer is going to come up. We need to wait for the broadside. You're going to do just like you practice. You got this. I'll tell you when to shoot. Or if you feel like you can shoot, you shoot. It's all depends upon the age of the kid, et cetera, right? But you've got that. The kid is still a soft piece of clay, right? You're still kind of helping shape that kid, but you're wanting to give them the tools to shape themselves, right? You don't want to be the potter. You're not God. You want to give them, like, hey, I'm going to kind of give you a form. You finish the details. And that's really what we do with kids, especially in hunting. But when it comes to an adult, I mean, there is much, much, much more mental block. So just that little aspect in of itself, I think you need to start on small game or birds. And if you pass that, you're like, oh man, holy crap, that was exciting. I got pumped. I mean, when you shot your first goose, I mean, you dropped it. I was like, did you get that bird? Because I was like, there's no way that I shot that bird alone, because I knew I had missed. You're like, I think I did. And you were just like levitating. You could tell. You're like, that moment, it took all of course, I malfunctioned in my own brain and didn't turn my GoPro on. But that moment probably lived. You probably thought that was 30 seconds, right? That moment was really long.
Oh, yeah. I have a flashbulb memory of it to this day. I remember the direction we were facing. I remember I crouched and you were standing up slightly behind me and to my left. Yeah. No, yeah, I remember.
Yeah. You probably you probably still remember every feeling from that moment, rising up, the gun touching your cheek, seeing nothing but that bird and that shot breaking and that bird just crumpling at point blank range and splashing into the water. And I mean, the visceral mist, you walking out to the bird, one of the most hilarious things we ever seen. Matt walking out to these birds. And I was just like, it was, a fault of mine, but I didn't go through like, hey, this is how we pick them up, because I didn't think Matt would be picking up the first bird, right? I thought I would go grab it. I'd be the retriever and I'd present it to him like, here's the fruit of your labor. Here it is. You did it. Congratulations, right? No, we dropped 3 or 4 birds in 2 or 3 passes, and he's got to go pick up his own goose or 2, and he's picking them up and he's grabbing them by the wingtip and dragging them along. And he's like, one's still alive. I don't know what to do with it. And I'm like, Matt, and I'm standing there. I'm like, Matt, you got to grab it by the neck. And I've got a half alive goose in my own hand, and I'm just wringing this thing, right? And Matt's standing there just locked up going,
yeah,
like, oh my God, I've never seen a man just straight up take a goose and swirl him like a baton.
And I think to myself, I'm a metal guy. I like macabre things. I don't think I did not. So you learn a lot about yourself doing things like this. And the one thing I did not think I would have any problem with is dying animals. And I don't anymore, but the first time I saw that goose that was not quite dead, I'll never forget the look that it gave me as well, ever, for as long as I live. And I would not trade that experience for anything. You learn so much about yourself in doing that. But I also learned that I have a bit of a weak stomach, which is something I need to work on. The dressing them and then that aspect of it was something that I learned about myself that I need to work on, and I have been.
Yeah. So. And we just spent almost 10 minutes talking about that one aspect of that very thing, of that start, right? So bottom line there, because we could, like I said, we could talk for hours on each little tidbit of what you had stated. Go for small game first if you're a new hunter, or if you're introducing somebody to hunting, go for small game first. Get that first kill on your belt. One, you're more likely to be successful. Just numerically, your chances are better. But 2, it's just getting through that mental block as an adult is a very big thing. And also dealing with the visceral experience of butchering that animal is a lot easier because there's not as much blood, there's not as much mess, there's not as much entrails. I mean, it's small, right? Especially a squirrel or a small duck, etc., or a grouse or a rabbit. It's very easy to get past that, right? Because when you get into a deer, and the first time you cut open a deer, and the first time one, it's almost your size, and 2, all you can think about when you have a deer on the ground as a kid or adult, even as a kid, not as much, but as an adult, is you're like, I'm about to cut this thing open that looks like my dog. Like, and then you start pulling apart and you're going, I feel like I'm reaching inside like myself right now. It's hard to not make that mental connection where you're like, I am very similar to this animal. And if it doesn't build some sort of respect and reverence for that animal, and you're like, wow, this is me. I am nothing more than what this animal is at essence. I'm just a soul inside of a meat sack. That's a pretty rough way to put it, but it really, I mean, I've got to this animal is gone. I've done my job. I've dispatched the animal cleanly. I've been as humane as possible, right? I've not torn it up like a mountain lion. I've actually dispatched it and made sure that it didn't suffer any more than it had to. Now this is sustenance for me. Yeah, and a deer, and like I said, I joke with you, I'm like, you haven't been elbow deep inside of a deer yet. It's kind of a vulgar and funny, for hunters it's funny, but for other people it might sound really vulgar and kind of nasty, but it's true. When you haven't been exposed to that sort of experience, you don't know yet, right? You're like, I know how it's supposed to go, but I've never seen it with my own 2 eyes. I've never done it with my own 2 hands. So once you get in there and you do it for the first time, and you start to feel out, hey, this is what it feels like to take a knife and slice open the abdominal muscle. This is what it feels like to literally have to roll out the entrails and find the diaphragm and cut it. And I will tell you, one of the most visceral experiences is the first time I ever reached up inside of a deer and pulled out the heart. It was just bouncing around. The cardiovascular sac was ruptured. It was just pretty much severed off, but it had a little bit of attachment left. I reached up in and I had resistance, and I pulled it out, right? And it was in my hands. I remember cupping it in my hands like it was a precious gem and staring at it going, this could be my heart.
Yeah.
And thinking to myself, I have to do something with this that is worthy of this animal. Even if it's just feeding it to my dogs, it's not going to go to purposeful waste, right? I'm going to make use of this creature. And so, what this creature left behind. And that's another aspect. And I try to introduce this to new hunters too, is I'm like, there's the aspect of, hey, this is how you find the animal. This is how you kill the animal. This is how you bush the animal. This is what you look for tracking. This is what you look for a good shot, etc. But when it's all said and done, your primary job is done. I feel terrible. If I haven't dispatched an animal outright, I feel awful. It can quite honestly ruin a successful hunt for me if I screw it up. And so what I try to imprint on new hunters, and Matt, you chime in, based on your experience of what I've taught you and shown you as me kind of being your mentor in this example. When you get that animal on the ground, it's important for you in your own way to pay respects to that creature, because you did just take a life. You ended its existence. It was going to die just like you are someday. And it's a very real realization of mortality. And it's a very, very critical, fundamental growing point, whether you're 4 years old or you're 60 years old, to see that. Because, and I think the younger you can be to see that is more important, because it prepares you for losing people in your life, right? Which is a completely different aspect we're not even going to touch here. But it's just that connection of, there is a finite existence to us. And we have to cross the unknown barrier at some point. And I was the reason this animal just did. So I need to show respect and thank it for what it has given up for me. Because that animal didn't voluntarily walk up to me and go, sir, and hand you a knife, go, slice my throat and take my flesh. Make use of my body, please. I beg of you, sir.
Can we drink some coffee first? If you could, I'm on a talking deer. I want to get to know you before I kill you.
Yeah.
So
they don't. That's not what's happening. So you really, really, really have to. I feel is important. Impress upon your what is the word I'm losing here? If you're a mentor, apprentice, your apprentice, if you're the apprentice or you have an apprenticeship, you need to absorb. If you're the mentor, you need to, like a squeezed sponge, give every little bit out, because, and that is a critical point. I mean, you haven't gotten to see me yet, but every single time I've ever killed a deer or any sort of animal, like, I say a silent prayer. I especially deer for some reason, but I get the animal on the ground. I'm still levitating from that experience that might have lasted half a second to 4 minutes. And I just put my hand over its chest, and I press into it, and I just say, I vocally say, thank you. I'm sorry. And thank you. And basically be at peace. Go into the next world, or you say into the well of souls with you is kind of the joke, but I don't know what happens to that creature's life force, right? Only God does. So to me, I just want to say, and for me, being a Christian and being of faith, I say, thank you, God, for this harvest and for this creature's life. And thank you to the creature for giving its life to me for my sustenance and for my well-being and for my family. Even if my family's just me and my dogs, right? It's providing further life. All that energy that it consumed, it does release. And we do the same thing. So that's a critical point, I think, as a new hunter or somebody mentoring a new hunter. if you don't have any sort of inkling of that, I think you need to reevaluate what you're doing and why you do it. Because that kind of ideal should resonate with you in some form and really give you a deep breath kind of moment going, yeah, this really just happened.
Yeah.
It's almost like watching a movie because it's almost an out of body experience. It's I had to do this and I did it. And now the real work comes, right? It is that butchering the animal. It's the, gutting. It's the hauling out. It's the skinning, the butchering, the processing, and then finally the cook and the eat. And it's that moment, 4 months later, because we have modern technology and we can or freeze stuff. It's that moment of that venison or that goose or whatever it may be hits your taste buds. And you're going, wow, this is so good. But if you're the guy who harvested it, you're the gal that harvested it, that's going to be in your back of your mind going, yeah, this is what I did it for. But it's not just the consumption, right? It's I did it because it was worth doing. And it was something I was by genetics or blood or predetermined fate had to do, whatever you want to look at it as. So, and I'll let you talk off of that point, Matt, but that's what I want to convey. If you're a mentor, instill that reverence and instill that importance to your good God, the word has escaped me again. To your
pupil.
Your pupil,
pupil.
The A word. What's the A word?
Apprentice.
Your apprentice. Yes, your apprentice. Maybe the wine is not a good idea, Matthew.
I think it's a brilliant idea. Well, so I'm
brilliant idea. All right. This is the end of the bottle, by the way. This is the end of the bottle.
Goodness. I mean, you're a big boy. You can handle it, but that's a lot.
Yeah, the body can, but I don't know so much that the mind can.
I have warmth emanating from my center mass. On your point, I'm not quite as, or I have not been up until now quite as deliberate with showing that reverence. But I mean, I know that I have a flashbulb memory of every single animal that I have ever killed or processed or even just carried. Like if somebody else that we were with killed them and I had to carry them, I just have a flashbulb memory. Yeah. I think that the single most, so like there's a lot of sub interests that are required. Like you need to at least be somewhat interested in firearms to be in the hunting, or bows if that's your thing, or archery.
Some sort of weapon, right?
Yeah, you have to be somewhat interested in it. But I think the balloon, the umbrella interest needs to be in learning about yourself, because you can. I mean, you're talking about using these boxes. You don't learn shit about yourself except for your favorite Instagram butt model, or your favorite, I don't know, whatever the algorithm is showing you should buy. So you don't learn much about yourself using your phone. You learn about yourself. So like in jiu-jitsu, you don't know how you react to a state of panic until a 240-pound man is laying on your chest and is not letting you go. Granted, you can tap and get out of it, but yeah, I mean, you don't know how you react in panic situations until you learn something about yourself. You learn about your response when you're cornered. So in hunting, you learn about how you react to the prospect of death. If you look at an animal you just killed and you can't think about how incredibly precious and precarious it is being a human, if you can't reflect on that for a moment, I cannot even imagine not having a moment of profundity doing it.
Well, it's almost like saying, in a way, when we talk about this, if you don't have that profound, just awestruck moment, at least on the first time you do it, you might want to double check that you were born with a soul and aren't just made of clay, because or that maybe you do just need to strip down to your skivvies and go belong in the woods, because you may not have that humanity in you. I mean, not many animals besides ourselves, many creatures in this world have that sort of deep, soulful, mental thought process.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a need, right? I mean, we cultivate creatures and plants for our own consumption and use, we have ultimate control over this world to an extent, right? There are limitations.
Yeah,
And the world will right itself if it needs to over our influence, but we have to be good stewards. And that is an incredibly important part to consider, is that the stewardship, it's part of that realization, that profound moment, is that acceptance of stewardship. It's, I not only have control to take this animal's life, I have control to influence this animal's life up to the point of taking. I still have to a lot of times outsmart the creature. I have to understand its habits and its needs and its wants and desires and its true ecology. And I will tell you, some of the best hunters may not have a degree in ecology or biology, but they know more than your average gal or man knows in a university about these animals, because they live with them, because they see them every day, because their entire mind's focus is on that creature and the stewardship of that creature. Because there is nothing more frustrating, rewarding, and trying than having to care and steward for land and a creature that ultimately you don't have that much influence over, that you are forcing yourself to make those influences on, that if you disappeared, they might not do as well or they might do better, but you're trying to make it so that they conform to what you believe is going to be best for them in a way, because that bloodline is going to exist in some way, shape, or form for that creature somewhere down the road, right? It's probably not going to be as great because of how much influence we've put on this earth if we aren't good stewards. But we are entrusted as stewards of this earth as being, just from a biological standpoint, the top dog. As a faith-based standpoint, in my personal perspective, so I won't speak for you, Matt, but God entrusted us as stewards of this earth, upon our creation. We are this special child, right? We are, everything is below me, but the rest are below you kind of existence. So our neglect is bad stewardship. Just letting whatever happen. I mean, look at the wildfires that happened out west, just from basically just letting the forest, through our inaction, gather too much tinder over 100 years. And then they want to blame it on this climate change, which, once you dig into it, there's things we've influenced and there's things we couldn't possibly have any control over, like the sun. How in the hell are we supposed to influence the way the sun acts upon our atmosphere and our magnetic field, which drives weather events on Earth? There's so many things.
Yeah, solar activity is one of the single most important things to the Earth's climate, and it is constantly in flux.
But it's that idea that, one, we are stewards, but don't get too full of yourself, right? And people have this cognitive dissonance where they're like, we don't have that much control over Mother Nature, but we're ruining the Earth.
Well, I also love
what?
the majority of the critics of the tradition of hunting live in cities. I feel like, I could be making an assumption, but I feel like the majority of them live in developed areas or cities, which are massive pieces of litter, which they have no earthly idea of. I don't know. I don't want to speak too out of turn here, but they're like massive pieces of litter, and they criticize things they've never seen or done.
I think you'll find a lot of the people are regurgitating what they've been told by somebody they thought was trustworthy. I think and that goes across any sort of subject whatsoever, but I think what you'll really find ultimately is that these people have no concept, who are truly adamantly against hunting and haven't been exposed to a positive influence in their life when it comes to this particular topic. It's because they're either control freaks, and this is their passion they've latched onto as a control freak, which I genuinely believe, which if you truly feel the need to control other people, you have a mental sickness and you need to work on that with a therapist or spiritually. But I think that what you'll find when you really dig into it is that these people have no exposure to it, and they don't go through the mental, I don't want to say strain, but the cognitive process of understanding that to exist, just exist, not live, because we can categorize living and existing into two separate realms if we really want to dig into it. If they just want to exist, they have to consume, and something has to die for that to happen. Whether it is the flesh of a vegetable or the flesh of an animal that is much more animate, something has to perish for their existence. And guess what? For that plant or animal to have existed, not just lived, but existed, that flesh had to consume other flesh, had to consume, even if it was decaying. Oh, well, that fungi only grows on decaying matter. The matter's decaying because the fungi and bacteria exist because the matter once lived. There are very few creatures in this world that exist off of literal dust. And I can bet you that that dust once came from something that lived. Everything is consumption and release of energy in this universe. And it is the law of the universe. There is no destruction of energy. It is simply converted. And when it comes to life, to living matter, one form has to die in order for another to grow. So
the dissonance with plant, like the dissonance with plants, it's literally they would prefer people. Some people, and again, make your own decisions. I have no desire to change your mind, but it's just funny to me the dissonance in that they would rather eat something that doesn't scream when it dies, for lack of a better. Well, like plants are very much alive. They don't turn and look at you when you walk in the room, but there is something that it's like to be a plant. I feel in my soul there is something that it is like to be a plant. And they give themselves to us, and ultimately when we die, I mean, nowadays most people bury or cremate, but previously you would die and you would give yourself to plants. I mean, it's an ecosystem, but I think that the dissonance here, and again, back to knowing and learning about yourself, is that some people would rather eat something that is quiet when it dies, and other people understand that you got to get your hands dirty, I guess. I don't know how else to put that.
Yeah. What's that willingness to get your hands dirty, right? It's like, maybe it's just an exploratory moment for you. If you're getting into hunting, you're like, hey, I just really want to be part of one harvest and go through the whole process and consume it to understand in part where my sustenance comes from and how I continue to exist on this earth until a force beyond my control decides otherwise. Right? So, like you said, that dissidence is really, really determinant upon your mental outlook. If you're able to accept your mortality, I feel like you can really get into hunting, or at least the concept of why people do it. If you can't accept your own mortality, there's things there that you really need to reconcile with yourself. I would say with God, and with maybe the help of somebody else, whether it's a counselor or not, talking to them and be like, hey, what is your emotional hurt with the idea of not existing? Because that's really what it comes down to. It's painful to think I will not be here one day. The first time you have that thought, probably as a child, when you realize death is a thing, you're like, someday I won't be here. It's probably the time, either the first time you see or experience death, or the first time you realize people had lives before you existed, before you were conceived, right? There are pictures of mom and dad having fun before you were even conceived. And that is really hard. It's a very hard mental thing to grasp, right? Because a squirrel is not going to get that, right? A squirrel only knows now. A deer only knows now. There are very few creatures, and we are the top one, that understands past, present, and future. Most creatures only know now in what I feel from basically genetic memory. They don't understand that mommy and daddy squirrel existed before the first litter of pups, right?
And granted, I know nothing about the life of the squirrel, but mommy squirrel probably left them their own devices when it was like 6 months old. It was like, all right, I gotta go out.
Well, the second they could run outside of the nest, they were, all right, bye.
You're kind of cracking my style, baby squirrel.
Yeah.
Bigger.
And, you know, a month later, they don't even know that they're related, so they're probably trying to screw each other. So, you know, it's...
Which people do that too. All right, give credit to squirrels. They're not as dumb as you say. People do that too, all right?
You do that too, yes. But that's a topic for another day. I'm going to take a drink on that note.
You get the most searched subject on Pornhub, and that'll tell you exactly.
Oh, sweet baby Jesus.
An hour and 21 minutes, and I finally brought up Pornhub. It's been burning a hole in the back of my head the whole time.
Well, we're recording the podcast right now, and I'm trying not to look at the live comment feed here, but Matt, I'm gonna feed your ego. Avid waterfowler who joined us my last podcast last week while I was in Nebraska says 7-string guitar ! He's metal. So
fuck yeah, dude. Fuck yeah.
Matt, you've got a fellow metalhead there. It seems like Avid waterfowler, if I remember correctly, he's up in Western Pennsylvania. And hello, welcome to the podcast. Glad you could join us, Avid. And maybe someday we'll have you on to talk to Matt just about, fingering your guitars.
I'm a lot better at fingering my guitars than I am my trumpet, I guess. Yeah, my trumpet.
Your trumpet?
I had 7-string guitar. I've only had it for a little while, but I play it every single day. I love that thing.
Yeah, you've been gushing over that thing for a long time. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I regret zero guitar purchase. I make emotional decisions about cars, trucks, and guitars.
Avid says, "Hey guys, hey Avid, glad you could join us." We're almost, Avid, just so you know, we're almost done with our podcast, but we're going to be in an after show here in not too long a time. So we'll continue shooting the bull here on all topics in a little bit. But
where pee is stored.
And Matt's going to take a drink of straight Jameson. He really is metal. He really is metal. I should have. You know what though? The wine is good because if I had jumped in and been like, all right, I'm going to join you and just suck off a bottle of Jameson, I'd be gone by now. Because Matt's nursing it and having a very good time, even keel, smiley, glowing, warmth from within. I would have been, you know what the problem is with squirrels?
It's just like the problem I have. It's my mom.
Why didn't you love me more? But a little taste of what the after show is going to be. It's going to be a complete expletive fest. But anyhow, yeah, like I said, we're winding down here. I think we've really covered a lot more in depth about hunting itself than it is to be a new hunter. But I would say one of my final questions to you, Matt, for guys who are either mentoring or apprenticing as new hunters or looking to get into it, what are your top 5 takeaways from your first year as a hunter, from the very first hunt to today? What mental state have you gone through or changed, and what has become your attitude towards the tradition and passion and honestly the genetic inheritance of this primal drive?
So top 5 takeaways. So the first, and this is kind of what we were talking about most recently, is that it is, above all, it is a spiritual experience. So top 5 takeaways. Spiritual experience. It's fascinating how you can find yourself almost in a different skin while you're out there. So like I'm still a noob and I mean that in every sense of the word, I'm a noob. But to be out there and to be thinking as the animal, I mean, you're hunting for a deer. I'm trying to imagine and think being a deer, knowing that you could slip into that skin is really cool. That was a takeaway that I was not expecting to have inside the first year. I thought that was something that would come after a very. I'm not saying I'm good at it. I'm saying that I'm trying. So that was an interesting takeaway. Let's see. Do not buy high dollar gear. For the love of God, do not buy high dollar gear. I bought expensive camo and all that. Well, not expensive. I bought mid-range camo. Completely and totally unnecessary. I bought cheaper stuff that I wear over top of it. And to boot, the first shotgun that I used was a 1970, I think. So it was a family shotgun that my grandfather had that I was the only one to shoot it within the last 20 years. So do not buy expensive gear. It is not necessary. So what am I on, 3?
Yeah.
Is that 3?
Yep.
Do not be put off by failure. Again, I said that in the beginning, that a majority of the times you go out, you will not, well, not a majority, but often you will go out and not be successful. So you need to be okay with that. And being okay with failure in that way was important for me to learn. That was another thing I learned about myself. And there is a lot of nuance to it. And I think you can learn something from literally anybody that you meet that also does it. If you've been hunting your entire life, some newbie some like 10-year-old kid that's getting into it might give you a nugget that's worth paying attention to. And the same is true for literally anybody that you meet that also hunts.
Right.
I think that it's one of the more accepting communities. I mean, people that hunt can talk about hunting for about 10 years straight if they wanted to. And they'll be fine with it. I mean, Joey, we have a building inspector that is just great to work with. And I think that we talk about hunting for about the entire time he's here. So in the community, just pick the brain of anybody that does it for any nugget you can find.
Right. Well said. Good recommendations.
Thank you.
Well, guys, I guess that'll wrap up the main portion of the podcast. We're going to edit this down and keep it here on the YouTube channel until further notice. And I might eventually pull the audio and we'll post someplace else, but we'll keep those updates to you guys as needed. If you are a subscriber to the channel, thank you very much. Make sure you hit that notification bell to stay up to date on all things here that happen in American Arms Channel with Bad Company Waterfowl, Bad Company Podcast, and all of our other ventures with guns, gear, hunting, and just living a free life here in the wonderful United States of America. And remember that freedom does not come free, and fight for it every chance you get, because these passions that we've talked about tonight, they are one small neglect away and one lack of vigilance away from disappearing for your lifetime. So as always, go out and vote, go out and speak your mind and exercise your rights as a human being. Matt, anything to add as we close up the podcast tonight?
Love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor. Very Christian-like of you to say. And I jest him because although I am Christian, he does not entirely identify as one. I'm pushing him that way.
We get to the same place. I just disagree on some of the very, very fine details. We get to the same place, though.
I think most people would, though.
Yeah.
I think we can both live by the same creed, though, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I really appreciate your viewership today. Again, we're going to have an after show, and we're going to keep on talking until either the liquor runs out or it's time to go to bed. So, as always, guys, I'm Drake from American Arms Channel. With me today is Matt Justice, one of the Bad Company crew. You're going to see a lot more of him if you pay attention to the channel and also tune into our podcasts. So, as always, God bless. Keep your powder dry. We'll see you the next time, guys. And that is the end of the podcast, and we're now officially into the after show. So, toast, finish the drink. Well, I am down an entire bottle of wine, so I think that's going to be it for alcohol for me for the evening. I'm going to transition to my constant sweet iced lemonade.
I was going to say, your blood